The name Salige remained unknown to most. This man, seeking romantic relationships through modern dating platforms, could not have predicted that he would become the victim of a young woman whose obsession with certain figures had gone beyond the bounds of sanity. This case, reminiscent of a horror movie plot, shocked the public to such a degree that people refused to believe the events were real. Physical evidence, fingerprints, and case materials become tools for detectives in solving such crimes. The biographies of both sides of the conflict, both the victim and the perpetrator, often provide keys to understanding their actions. Each element forms a mosaic of this complex case. Syed al-Salige was born around 1983 in Iraq. He spent his childhood in a family with many children. He was surrounded by 5 brothers. Information about his early years is limited, but it is known for certain that he lost his mother at a young age. 2014 became a turning point. He made the decision to leave his homeland. People close to him said he was driven by a desire to leave suffering behind, turn a new page, and build a different future. His choice for emigration fell on Germany. In his new location, he managed to find work in the security field. Syed made efforts to integrate into the unfamiliar environment. Hours free from professional duties, he devoted to soccer, a sport for which he felt a genuine passion. However, his stay in the German state was approaching its end. According to information from certain sources, after approximately 7 years of living in this country, he had only 4 months left to spend there. That's how long his visa remained valid. His intentions included returning to his birthplace, restoring connections with his roots, and realizing his life's main dream. He wanted to meet a loved one, build a family nest, and end his solitary existence. By 2021, the man had turned 38. He continued to live alone, but his soul burned with an authentic desire to share existence with someone close. This prompted him to dive into studying current methods of finding partners when he began using mobile applications for making connections. Some see this as a path to meeting their soulmate, for others it's just a temporary fascination. However, reality sometimes unfolds in completely unpredictable ways. It was in this manner that he discovered an account that instantly attracted his interest. The profile owner presented herself under the pseudonym Domina Chiria. After light and casual conversation through private messages, both reached an agreement about a date with intimate undertones. The date was set, May 1, 2021, around 8:30 in the evening. At precisely these moments, an unusual event occurred on one of the country's main highways. Traffic stopped. Drivers saw on the roadway the figure of a man whose body had serious injuries. He was crawling along the asphalt, to reach the edge of the road and call out to those around him for help, but soon lost consciousness. Several people stopped their vehicles to provide assistance. Within a short time, an emergency medical team arrived at the location, and the injured person was urgently transported to a medical facility. Medical personnel managed to bring his condition to relative stability and organized his placement in the intensive care unit. His life continued, but he had slipped into a comatose state. The victim was identified as Syed. Less than an hour later, just a few kilometers from the previous location, residents of a certain part of the city witnessed an unusual scene. Moving along the sidewalk was a young female. Her feet were bare, her socks looked dirty, and her facial expression resembled a state of psychological shock. Her clothing showed complete saturation with blood. Witnesses to the event immediately contacted emergency services. Law enforcement officers who arrived on the scene detained the girl and began the process of clarifying circumstances. At that moment, she made a confession about committing unlawful acts against Syed. The details of this criminal story, which stunned German society, became known gradually. Due to strict personal data protection regulations that function in this state, the perpetrator's identity could only be established under the abbreviated designation Sarah M. Her age was only 18 years old. Sarah was born in 2002 in Switzerland, and her family had sufficient financial status. She was an only child in the family and was raised in an atmosphere of affection and care. The initial stage of her life passed in a calm environment. She was characterized as a polite and conscientious schoolgirl. However, transformation came at the stage of entering the teenage period. After her parents officially dissolved their marriage, Sarah and her mother began systematically changing their address of residence, migrating between different parts of the city. They changed educational institutions until they found a permanent place in Bavaria, a region located in southeastern Germany. It was from this period that Sarah's manner of behavior began to demonstrate marked changes. Her temperament became increasingly hostile. Her academic performance deteriorated, she began provoking conflicts and demonstrating disrespect to people around her. Data began coming in that during this time period, she began displaying violent tendencies toward her parents. She regularly left home without permission and entered into conflicts with peers. She played heavy music genres at maximum volume. She categorically refused to comply with the educational institution's dress code, instead choosing provocative makeup that contradicted the school's established norms. Although such manifestations could be interpreted as standard teenage rebellion, significantly more serious alarm signals began to emerge later. Sarah developed a pathological interest in situations associated with criminal activity. She began openly demonstrating affinity for a pair of scandalous figures. We're talking about American criminals, Richard Ramirez and Ted Bundy. Richard, known by the nickname the Night Stalker, conducted attacks throughout the 80s in Los Angeles, breaking into his victims' dwellings. His figure attracted public attention not exclusively through the brutality of his acts, but also through his brazen manner at court sessions, his eerie eye expression, and interest in mystical directions. Ted gained fame in the 70s through a series of aggressive acts with lethal intent committed against female representatives in many regions of the country. His image component captivated attention, he possessed charisma, demonstrated intellectual abilities, and masterfully applied psychological manipulation. Sarah decorated her personal space in her room with posters depicting these criminal personalities. There were claims that she experienced romantic affection toward Richard, and she set images of both these persons as background pictures on her mobile device and in social media accounts. Additionally, she drew pentagrams on her hands, imitating the habits of one of them, and created visual symbols associated with ideological currents that are banned in Germany due to historical context. At 15 years old, Sarah had her first experience consuming illegal substances. By age 16, she was systematically using ecstasy. During the next 2-year period, law enforcement repeatedly detained her. In one episode, she was assigned to perform community service after an incident when she used abusive language toward police workers. At a certain point, her mother discovered in her living quarters a rope suspended from the ceiling, which only increased concern about her mental well-being. Over time, Sarah on multiple occasions ended up in psychiatric institutions as a result of self-elimination attempts. During her stay in one such institution, medical specialists established a diagnostic conclusion for her: borderline personality disorder. This is a severe mental condition that affects self-perception, emotional regulation, and interaction with the social environment. Receiving such a medical conclusion became a serious psychological blow for her, and she shared her internal experiences on social media platforms. She posted video materials in which she described the difficulties of existing with such a diagnosis. It's necessary to understand that having a mental diagnosis does not transform an individual into a lawbreaker. Many persons with similar medical conclusions lead normal, balanced existences. It was during this life interval that Sarah established acquaintance with a young man named Leon. Romantic relations developed between them. Information about his personality is quite limited, it's only known that he had difficulties associated with the use of illegal narcotic drugs. At the initial stage, their romance developed harmoniously. They spent every free minute in each other's company, and for Sarah, this relationship became her first entry into the sphere of physical intimacy. However, gradually her manner of interaction began to transform. Her emotional state lost stability. She could instantly transition from a state of balance to outbursts of fury without any preliminary signs. A syndrome of jealousy began to manifest in their connection. She felt jealous of Leon regarding absolutely every person who entered his circle. According to available information, Sarah developed a pathological craving for physical closeness. She made demands of her partner regarding intensification of roughness during intimate interactions. She strived for extreme practices that gradually lost the ability to bring her satisfaction. After approximately 18 months of romantic relations, Leon began experiencing significant psychological discomfort, and in April 2021, he made the decision to sever their connection. This termination of the relationship caused Sarah serious emotional trauma. According to investigative data, it was at this moment that her psychological collapse began, and she started forming a dark plan of retaliation. At the first stage, she made attempts to destroy her ex-partner's reputation by disseminating false information. She claimed that he allegedly subjected her to moral humiliation, applied violent actions to her, and posted her private images in public access without obtaining permission. However, these accusatory claims received no confirmation. No evidence was found, and the overwhelming majority of people in her social circle didn't trust her stories. This most likely only intensified her indignation. After this, her revenge concept began transforming into increasingly eerie and disturbing forms. In the morning hours of April 28, she downloaded to her mobile device 3 software applications for establishing romantic contacts and constructed a falsified account under the pseudonym Dominicheria. It's this pseudonym that will be eternally associated with her criminal story. In her profile, she published several provocative photographs in lingerie and presented herself as a person with bisexual orientation who doesn't have great experience but shows interest in themes of domination, submission, and deriving pleasure from inflicting pain. She had confidence that such an image would attract the interest of mature, socially isolated, and psychologically vulnerable male representatives, and her calculations proved correct. The total number of persons who responded to her messages reached 241 people. Subsequently, with the support of her acquaintance, she made a purchase of a hunting-type knife at a hardware store. Because her age parameters didn't allow her to legally buy such goods, she turned with a request to a friend to perform this operation instead of her. Later it became clear that the female person who provided her assistance didn't possess information about her true intentions. Sarah conducted search queries on the global network, trying to find information about other persons who committed crimes, besides those characters by whom she was already fascinated. The subject of her interest became anatomical zones of the human body most susceptible to injuries, as well as time intervals necessary for an injured person to die as a result of traumatic injuries. According to the investigative agency's hypothesis, Sarah cherished ambitions to transform into the most famous female criminal in human history. During the 3 days after creating accounts in the applications, she initiated intensive text communication with numerous male representatives. From the court case documentation, it became known that the first person who established contact with her was a man who identified himself by the name Sam. He expressed a proposal to organize a personal meeting and asked about the possible location of this event. Sarah demonstrated a positive reaction and provided guarantees that her age exceeded 18 years. Additionally, she announced that she had no limitations regarding various variants of physical closeness and derived pleasure from controlling the process. At the moment when Sam posed a question about her having previous experience of interaction with more mature men, they determined the date of their meeting, May 3rd. The next person who began dialogue with her was a user who used the nickname Logco. His communication style was characterized by frankness. He without extra words posed a question about the possibility of a quick meeting. Sarah provided a response that her schedule was free after the completion of May 3rd. In response to his idea of spending time alone in a car cabin, she proposed an alternative, more dangerous scenario, to go to a building in a forest zone. He expressed agreement. He posed questions regarding specific practices, and she shared information about using handcuffs and material for covering eyes. The date of their meeting was established for May 4th. The third communication occurred with a person named Anthony, who identified himself as a person who desires to be in a subordinate role and put forward a proposal that she perform the dominating function. Sarah accepted this proposal, and they agreed on a meeting for the period between May 3rd and 5th. There were a significant number of similar text exchanges, though not all of them were included in the official case documentation. It was established that she had intentions to organize personal meetings with each person chosen by her. Sarah without concealment told one of her female acquaintances that she had a plan to sequentially meet with each of these men and commit upon them using the purchased cold weapon. It's worth emphasizing that Sarah's manner of behavior was systematically characterized by polar manifestations. She uttered and performed shocking actions with such regularity that people in her circle found it problematic to determine the boundary between her joking statements and genuine intentions. Sarah's acquaintance never filed an official appeal to law enforcement agencies because she didn't take seriously the things the girl told her about. However, before Sarah could realize a meeting with any of the men she had planned, on May 1st, contact with Syed appeared in her text dialogues. At 10:50 in the morning period, he transmitted to her a brief greeting message and expressed wishes for a pleasant day. Sarah provided a response without delay. She posed a question about what goals he was pursuing using this application. Syed openly shared that he was a solitary person who was open to various scenarios of building relationships but had no interest in short-term, non-serious contacts. It was after receiving this response that Sarah made the decision that he would become the first person who would suffer from her actions. On this same calendar day, they established an agreement about a personal meeting. She supplemented her text message with multiple graphic symbols depicting kisses. She posed a question about his having a personal transportation vehicle since, in the populated locality where she, according to her claims, resided, railway infrastructure was absent. Eventually, they determined the meeting place to be a location near a public transport stop at 8 p.m. From this point, he was to pick her up for a journey to an isolated building located in a forest massif. Several hours before the planned meeting, Sarah transmitted an audio message to her acquaintance. She communicated that she had intentions to leave the house and embody her plan into reality. She noted that she was experiencing a state of emotional uplift in connection with future events and asked that success be wished to her. At 8:16 p.m., Syed arrived at the meeting place and took the girl with him. After only a few minutes passed as they were moving along an unpaved road that, according to Sarah's claims, led to a forest building, the situation changed radically. Suddenly she extracted the cold weapon and performed a penetrating strike into the neck area. Syed applied maximum efforts for self-defense. He managed to take away the weapon, stop the movement of the transportation vehicle, and, despite the pain from the injury, reached the main highway. Among the transportation vehicles that stopped movement to provide assistance was a vehicle in which a medical sphere specialist was present, which created the possibility for immediate provision of emergency help. During this same time interval, Sarah left the event location, moving in the reverse vector. Due to received traumatic injuries, Syed plunged into a comatose state. During 3 weekly periods, his sister and father maintained hope and turned to prayers, hoping that he would restore consciousness and be able to provide information about the circumstances of the event. However, preserving his life didn't work out. Syed ceased his existence. In May 2022, Sarah's court proceedings provoked massive interest from the public. Media representatives published fragments of her official explanations, which demonstrated the depth of her fascination with persons who committed high-profile crimes. At the court session for persons who hadn't reached adulthood in the city of Bamberg, she appeared without any visible manifestations of feelings of guilt or empathy. According to the claims of Syed's relatives, Sarah demonstrated a provocative manner of behavior, looked self-confident, and was dressed in items that, as was supposed, were purchased by her specifically for visiting the court proceedings. The prosecution representative provided information that her actions were the result of detailed planning. 5 days before committing the attack, she purchased the cold weapon and developed a methodology for attracting potential victims. She applied the application for romantic acquaintances as a hunting ground. She constructed an attractive account that instantly attracted the interest of numerous male representatives. During the court process, epistolary materials created by her during the period of being under arrest were announced. They became a critically important component of the investigation for establishing the motivational component of the crime. In one epistolary material directed to her mother, Sarah requested that photographic images of Richard Ramirez be sent to her, defining him as the most important figure in her life. In another letter addressed to a friend named Tim, she without concealment acknowledged that all events occurred exclusively by her will and were previously organized. Tim for a long period believed that Syed could have caused her injury, and that's why she reacted in such a way. However, after familiarization with the letter, his position transformed. In his speech during the court session, Tim emphasized that from the initial moment of their acquaintance, he sensed in Sarah a certain eeriness, as if she were gripped by a craving for bloodshed. He even recalled one disturbing dialogue in which she expressed conviction that Jack the Ripper, the mysterious criminal person who was never detained, was actually a female representative. Moreover, she identified this figure as her ideal for emulation. A forensic medical examination specialist provided information that during the period when Syed was still alive, Sarah demonstrated dissatisfaction because she was threatened with long-term deprivation of freedom for what she defined as an attempt to commit a simple crime. According to the story of a law enforcement worker, that night in the medical facility, Sarah described the events to him in such a way as if she were sharing memories after an ordinary evening walk. Her manner of behavior looked so natural, as if depriving another person of life was a routine matter. She also mentioned the termination of relations with Leon, which, according to her words, was a difficult psychological situation for her. The legal representative of the defense side made an attempt to challenge this testimony, claiming that such dialogue wasn't spontaneous but rather had characteristics of a disguised interrogation. The psychiatric diagnostic procedure established in Sarah an emotionally unstable type of personality disorder. According to the interpretation of the accused herself, she made attempts to compensate for internal existential emptiness through intensive experiences. In her specific situation, through copying the actions of criminal persons by whom she was fascinated. Expert specialists reached the conclusion that she understood the illegal character of her actions and possessed the ability to regulate her behavior at the moment of committing the criminal act. This testified that she was fully responsible for her actions. The defense side attempted to substantiate a position that Sarah functioned under the influence of mental illness that limited her capacity to understand the consequences of her actions. However, the judicial instance didn't accept this argumentation. The judicial decision had a harsh character. Sarah was assigned the maximum term of isolation from society that is provided by legislation for persons who haven't reached adulthood and committed crimes on German territory, a 15-year period of deprivation of freedom for committing murder. Additionally, the judicial instance ruled that after completion of the punishment term, she would be obligated to undergo forced therapeutic treatment in a psychiatric institution. The adoption of the judicial verdict provoked ambiguous reactions in society. Part of the public believed that the measure of punishment was too lenient, considering the cruelty and prior preparation of the crime. Another part emphasized the criticality of rehabilitation programs for young persons who violated the law. Syed's family experienced deep grief from the loss. They made a journey to Germany with hope for receiving a fair judicial decision. During court sessions, they spoke about the suffering they feel, about Syed's dreams for the future that will now not become reality. His sister, in an emotionally saturated speech, characterized her brother as a person with a kind heart and hard-working disposition who had a right to happiness, not to such a tragic completion of life. This criminal case attracted society's attention to the risks that can be concealed in applications for romantic acquaintances. It also initiated discussion about how society identifies and provides support to young persons with serious mental disorders. Numerous specialists emphasized that multiple warning signals existed in Sarah's behavior long before the tragic event. Her fascination with serial killers, aggressive behavioral patterns, mental health problems, all these factors should have provoked alarm in surrounding people. However, systemic mechanisms failed to carry out intervention in a timely manner. Even in the situation when Sarah without concealment told an acquaintance about her intentions, no person perceived this as a real threat. Specialists in the psychology field explain that the phenomenon of fascination with persons who committed crimes, which has the name hyperstophilia, although rarely encountered, can cause serious negative consequences. It represents particular danger when combined with personality disorders and unstable mental state. In Sarah's specific case, her obsession with the figures of Richard Ramirez and Ted Bundy went beyond the boundaries of ordinary fascination. She actively strived to imitate their criminal actions, desiring to achieve an analogous level of recognition as a criminal. This incident also raised the problem of romanticization of serial killers in mass media and popular culture. Some analysts expressed the opinion that representation of these criminal persons in cinematographic works, series, and documentary projects can exert negative influence on psychologically vulnerable population categories. After completion of the court process, representatives of organizations in the mental health sphere called for improvement of integration of assistance for teenagers with behavioral deviations. They emphasized the criticality of early intervention and systematic monitoring. Sarah's parents, particularly her mother, were in a state of shock from what happened. Despite awareness of their daughter's problems, they couldn't even suppose that she was capable of committing murder. Sarah's mother for a multi-year period attempted to obtain professional help for her daughter, but the mental health protection system often demonstrated ineffectiveness or insufficiency of resources. For other male representatives who had text communication with Sarah through dating applications, this story became a psychological shock. Many of them acknowledged that they potentially could have found themselves in a situation analogous to the one Syed found himself in. Part of them provided testimony to investigative agencies, describing the character of their interaction with her. Their stories contributed to forming a more complete picture of how Sarah carried out preparation for the criminal act. Sarah M.'s criminal case remains one of the most disturbing illustrative examples of how mental illness, unprocessed psychological trauma, and obsession with violent actions can lead to tragic consequences. It functions as a reminder about the necessity of serious attitude toward warning signals, the importance of psychological help accessibility, and the dangers of idealizing criminal personalities. For Syed's family, justice was achieved partially through the judicial verdict, but no measure of punishment is capable of returning to them their beloved family member, a man, brother, son. His existence was terminated during a period when he finally had hope of finding personal happiness and building the family about which he dreamed. This story functions as a tragic reminder that behind the screens of our electronic devices can be concealed not only potential romantic partners but also dangerous threats that we don't expect to encounter. And that sometimes the most eerie stories begin with the most mundane moments, an ordinary greeting message in an application for romantic acquaintances. I look forward to hearing your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. Until next time, friends.